Hey guys, welcome to the Isles House. Today we are doing our top 10 current New York Islander prospects in order 1 to 10, voted by our Patreon supporters. Joining us today is Gabe, also known as NHLFoley. Gabe, grab the mic, let them know where you are and who you are and where to find you.
Yeah, thanks, Tyler. Happy to be here. My name's Gabe Foley, NHLFoley on Twitter. Can also find me on Substack, just right under my name. Head of North American Scouting and managing editor for Recruit Scouting. Doing plenty of other in the hockey world, USA hockey world as well. So excited to be here today.
Thanks for joining us. We're really excited to have you. We know you know a lot of these prospects, so it's good to have someone with knowledge of this, to be honest, somewhat mediocre system at the moment. So, Tyler, we want to get started with the first name?
Yeah, so at number 10, we have Dmitry Gamzin. Is that how you pronounce it?
I believe
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, Dmitry Gamzin. He's a goalie. He was the Islanders 2024 fourth round pick, and he's playing in the KHL right now. He has 24 games played this season, 2.24 goals against average, a 9.28 save percentage, and a 7.8-6 record.
Gabe, you want to start us off on Gamson?
Yeah, happy to start us off on Gamson. What a player. What a player. I think we're gonna have to get used to saying his name pretty soon.
I'm gonna be
Islanders,
honest, I really haven't even heard of him
yeah.
before this.
No, it's good practice. Get us going. Islanders have a track record with these Russian goaltenders, and I think Gamson's, he's smooth, he's quick, stops on his spots, and he's one of those goalies, you see him tracking as he's moving. Some of these guys kind of gotta post up and see the puck once they're in their spot. Gamzin, I think his numbers back him up pretty well. He's been strong the last few years in Russia. He's super athletic. I really like the kid. I would have had him higher than 10 on my own list, but I don't know.
Really?
Now,
Yeah.
Gabe, I wanted to ask you on a goalie like Gamson. As you said, we have a history with the Russian goalies. Do you think he fell a bit because of the Russian factor, the KHL factor, where guys are somewhat of an unknown as far as coming over to North America, their contract situation there and whatnot? Is that a big reason why he fell, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is, and I think it uniquely impacts goalies. With a goalie, you're worrying about him getting into your pipeline within 2, 3 years, no matter where you're drafting him from. In Russia, a KHL starting role looks way better than AHL starting role, ECHL starting role, which is where a lot of these North America guys start out. So I think that's what we see with Gamzin. That's what we see with Igor Savragin in Philadelphia, Ivanov in Columbus. These are all super talented goalies. Russia's got the goalie pipeline right now, but they're falling just because you can't give them the same role.
Right. And now, as Islander fans, with Sorokin signed long term, we're kind of looking down the road and wondering if a player like him could become a solid backup in the NHL. Could you see that in his future?
Yeah, I can definitely see that with Gamson. I think it's an upside bet. He's athletic, he's smooth. You got to hope that he can keep the quick processing through to North American ice. But if he does that, you got an AHL starter that could squeak into that backup role.
And it seems like he has a similar style to a Sorokin, correct?
Yeah, I definitely say leans on those athletics more than he leans on, staying in his crease or following his post or anything like that.
Great, great stuff.
That's interesting. It also said when I was looking up his stats that he played in the VHL this year, which
Mhm.
is pretty much the KHL's AHL, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
did he start the season in the VHL or did he get
Yeah.
sent down? He started
Yeah,
there.
started in the minors, rotated through as the year went on. Pretty common for
Okay.
these U23 guys.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And it's funny because he actually his goals against average and save percentage was a little worse in the VHL this year. Still respectable, but seems like when he went to the KHL, he picked his game up.
Yeah, shine in the bright lights. That's what you want out of your kids.
Yeah, you like to see that. All right, moving on to number 9 here.
Yep.
We got Jesse Pulkkinen, the defenseman. The Islanders drafted him in the 2024 second round pick. He was 54th overall. His 2024 stats, he played for the Liga. Um, he has 38 games played, 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points. And then he also played for the Bridgeport Islanders. 10 games played, 0 goals, 1 assist, 1 point.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Gabe, I was really interested to ask you about this prospect because we know he has the size. He has a frame that's almost hard to comp in a way because there's not too many big defensemen like that are projected and hope to be these solid skaters as well. Now, when he was drafted in the second round by the Islanders, I remember seeing that many scouts did feel that he had pretty solid skating for his size. But then when I talked to people that watched him down at Bridgeport when he did make his debut down there, they said he's very raw. He looked a little slow. It might not out be his skating outright. It might be the pace of play in North America, but is it a long road here? Like, is he extremely raw where he might need 2, 3 years in the AHL before he comes up? Or is this someone that we could hope could make a jump a little sooner?
Yeah, it's interesting with Pulkkinen because he's heavy. It's really the word I'd use to describe him. His skating, he moves his feet well under him. He gets through small areas well, but he's not going to be the guy to pick up his feet and, go charging up the ice. And that's going to hold him back. I mean, I I would reason to bet we don't see his first AHL goal for a little bit until one of the clappers from the blue line goes in. Um, but really, these are the guys I want to invest in. These are the heavy guys who clear out the slot. You said it's hard to comp, and I definitely agree, but reminds me of, those early 2000s, early 2010s defensemen, the
Hmm.
Eric Brewer type that you could use to bully the slot. I think Pulkkinen does that well. So, do I think that his mobility will put him further down the list than maybe some of his better traits? Definitely. And that could be what holds him back from, an NHL debut anytime soon. But as Islanders look to go digging for injury replacements, I could see Pulkkinen being the guy in a year, 2 years, just because of frame alone.
Right. And now, off what you said, it suggests not too much offensive upside. Is that fair with Pokinen?
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely reason to bet he stays on his own side of the red line if he makes the NHL.
And does he have much physicality in his game?
Yeah, yeah, he's heavy, but he's strong. And I think that's the big thing with him is he really handles opponents well. And in the little I saw of him at Bridgeport, I think he did it there well too. I mean, just a pillar in the slot.
Right. And that's to me, if you don't have much offensive upside, that's what I want to see as a bigger player. You have to have
100%.
some physicality. You don't want a player that stands as tall as Pulkkinen does and bring zero physicality. So it's
Mhm.
good to hear.
Yeah, yeah, you got to fill up that third pairing just as much as you got to fill up the top pairing, and that's something I want to do with guys that got Pulkkinen's frame.
Right. Very good point. Tyler, number
Um,
8.
yeah, number 8, we have Camille Bednarik. He's a 2024 Islanders second round pick. He went 61st overall. He played at Boston University this previous season. In 40 games played, he had 3 goals, 17 assists for 19 points.
Yeah, I can take it with Bednarik.
Go
Yeah.
What a
for it.
kid. I mean, what a kid. He's a toolsy, he's an undersized, he's a not so physical centerman, but he's feisty, he's smart, he knows how to check sticks, he knows how to poke the puck into space, he knows how to make quick plays to work with his winger. You all sent me this list before we started recording the episode. I kind of got a chance to think about these kids and how they fit in New York a little bit. And the more I think about Bednarik, the more I think you're shooting for a third line center projection here. I don't think we can set our sights too much higher, but you watch him at BU, he was buried down their depth chart. But in those hard hitting moments, in the moments that they needed to play late in the game, tons in the championship game against WMU, BU was turned into Bednarik and they were turned into Devin Kaplan. Those were the two, and they played well. They played hard. They made an impact. So it's a third line center projection here in my eyes, but it's one that I'm confident in. One that I feel good about.
He's a good face-off guy too, right?
Yeah, good face-off guy.
So
Okay.
a lot of his description, and this may be a perfect world scenario, but It really reminds me of Pajot, if all things pan out. I think he could be a very similar player, and that would be huge for the Islanders because as Pajot's contract winds down, how nice would it be to have a homegrown version in the next couple of years? And also, one quick note on Bednarik. When he was drafted, he put out like the sickest draft video. I think that
So
alone
good.
upped his stock in my book. I swear to God. It was one of the better edits I've seen after a kid got drafted. Like right then and there, I called it a steal. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it was getting ahead of myself, but it just showed so much confidence putting out a video like that right after you're drafted in the second round.
Biggie Smalls in the background too, with
Yeah.
the background music.
Yeah. They were ready for one of the New York teams to pick him, and I'm glad we did it. But
Yeah.
yeah, Gabe, I thought that was a great description. I actually had the chance to speak to someone from BU, and he went over Iserman and Bednarik for me. And he said Bednarik is one of, like you just described, he's not going to really wow you, but he does so many of the little things right where you look up and you're just, like you said, clutch time comes up big, whether it's a face off, small little play in the corner, an assist. He actually, I believe, started racking up a bit more points second half of the season, correct?
Yep. Started finding his comfort in the slot, which was a big thing for him.
Right. And I think a lot of us get caught up in the Cole Isermans of the world where they jump off the page right away at the college level. We got to understand these kids are, especially one like Bednarik, he's 18 years old. It takes a little bit. You're playing against grown men. So I think him showing some development in the second half is huge. And he'll be one to watch at BU, obviously, along with Cole Iserman, his teammate.
Yeah, absolutely. Grow and roll incoming too. I mean, it's a pipeline up the lineup for him. And I think within 2 years, his junior season at BU, you're hoping to sign him at the end of that. If he's their top line center, I'm not surprised, filling a TJ Hughes in Michigan kind of role.
Yeah, because he'll be that veteran presence for them at that point. Because he does all the little things. So once the scoring comes around, he'll be relied on very heavily, I would think.
Yeah, yeah. Good kid too. Could wear a letter. I don't know if you guys have had the chance to talk to him, but he's a good mind.
Not yet, but hopefully one day.
Hey, there you
Yeah.
go.
All right. At number 7, we have the Islanders 2020 fourth-round pick, Alex Jeffries. So last year with the Bridgeport Islanders, in 59 games, he had 13 goals, 16 assists, and 29 points.
Yeah, so Jeffries is a player. When I spoke to some people, they were actually surprised he ended up signing with the Islanders because I believe he could have been a free agent following his final year at Merrimack. He put up some really good numbers, and when he first got to the AHL, he looked good. This past year, he had some flashes, he looked good, but then he seemed to have some drop off as well. Gabe, I want to ask you, do you see NHL potential in Jeffries? Because I've heard it both ways.
I think Jeffries is interesting. First, I think it's interesting that he's one of the few players on this list not drafted in the last couple of years. I mean, that tells you something about where the Isles are headed, and I think it tells you good things. Uh, but Jeffries was lauded as a junior prospect for his speed, for his ability to pick up his feet and really get down the ice. And as he's gone through college, as he's turned pro, I don't think that speed's working for him as much anymore. You can see it in how he plays. He's got to learn how to get his shoulder into guys and push his body around and kind of make his own space. And I mean, that's a hard adjustment when you've been the fastest kid on the ice for 5 years. So I think there's risk. There's risk with Jeffries. There's risk that he might top out at the top of the AHL lineup, but he's adjusting that physicality well. I mean, as someone who's watched him since he was young, I think I'm seeing a new edge, a new layer of grit to his game in the AHL. And if he can keep that rolling, I mean, it might be another bottom six projection, but it's another kind of guy that you want in the pipeline, want trying to compete for one of those bottom six winger roles.
Yeah, I
You
really
need
like
those
that.
guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that point too, Gabe, because you hear about a lot of these players that are top scorers at the lower levels, and then they have to adjust their game as they move up because basically they're approached by NHL scouting and they say, listen, if you want to make it in the NHL, you're probably going to have to be a bottom sixer. And if you want to be a bottom sixer, you got to bring some jam to your game. You got to play a little bit physical, get dirty in the corner. So maybe that's something a player like Jeffries is going to continue learning in the AHL because I do like his game. As you said, I think his speed sort of isn't where you'd expect it to be when he was coming up younger. He doesn't. I wouldn't say he looks fast at the AHL
Mhm.
level. Maybe more quick. He does get that shot off quick. I feel like he thinks quickly, but I don't see top of the line speed with him much at all. But I am hopeful he at least gets a shot here. And he's a player that, honestly, as of right now with the Islanders, should be one of the first call ups if something was to happen to one of their regulars this upcoming season.
Yeah. If only just to see what he can do. I mean, because that's the other thing too. So many players can just find the stitch at the NHL level.
I was upset they didn't give him the chance once they were eliminated
Exactly.
this season. Once you were down
Mhm.
to the last 5 games, what's to lose about playing in Alex Jeffries instead of one of the 30-plus-year-old vets? But it is what it is now.
I agree.
All right, at number 6, we have Marcus Gidloff. He's a goaltender. He played in the SHL last year. He had 17 games played, 2.33 goals against average, a 908 save percentage, 11-6-0 record. He also played for Sweden U20 World Junior Championship. 6 games played, 2.24 goals against average, 0.904 save percentage, a 3-2-0 record. And also, he was the Islanders 2024 fifth-round pick.
Yeah, Gidloff is a fun one to balance out a prospect system with. I raved about Gamson. Gamson, I think, is just one of the under the radar goalies that I'd really herald, that I'd really champion. I think he's athletic enough, but if you think that quick goalies who try and be a little flashy in their game is too much, Gidloff's your guy. He's a big body. He fills the space well. He doesn't offer up much angles. He sees the puck all the way to his chest. I believe he's expected to stick in Sweden next year, but that's just more time in a starting role. I mean, with a guy who's, maybe not posting dazzling numbers, but he's performing consistently. He's got the frame. He knows how to use his frame. I think he's on a good track.
Now, before with Gamzin, we sort of compared him stylistically to Sorokin. Would it be fair to compare Gidloff to another former Islander and Robin Leonard the way you just described him?
Yeah, yeah. I like the Leonard comparison. I think Gidloff lacks the aggression. Leonard knew how to play out of his crease really well, and he's not as quick. I think Gidloff's another kind of heavier player,
Mm.
but he's got that frame, and he knows, how to patrol the net well. He knows how to step up to shooters, knows how to, not give up his angles. Yeah, so I think the Leonard comparison makes a lot of sense. Maybe a little bit of, old Varlamov in there
All right.
too.
We like that one even more.
Uh,
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you, because these are our rankings. So if it was up to you, who would you have ranked higher, Gamzin or Gidloff?
I'd have Gamson up there. I think that Gamson has a sliver of starting potential.
Okay.
I really do. I think Gidloff tops out as a really talented backup. He can be a Michelini, or however you say Curtis's last name.
Mhm.
But I don't know if I ever see him filling a day-to-day starting role. I think Gamson could get there if he comes over to North American ice, gets the right shot. Maybe Sorokin's out for whatever reason. I think Gamson's the clutch player that can step up.
Good stuff. All right, Tyler, I think we're into our top five.
Top 5, here we go. Number 5, we have Quinn Finley. He's the Islanders 2022 third-round pick, selected 78th overall. This season, he played for University of Wisconsin, 37 games played, 20 goals, 20 assists, 40 points, which is pretty decent.
Yeah, Gabe, I mean, the numbers jump off the page to us Islander fans. I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched every game he played. I did watch a bit. When I saw him, I liked his game. Now, should we temper expectations here a little bit, or could we have a potential steal on our hands?
All right, all right. I don't want to get anyone too excited, because you go out throwing steel, you go out throwing top six projections. Players don't hit it. Everyone thinks, we were all wrong.
Shoot
But
your shot, Gabe. Shoot your shot.
Quinn Finley, he's the kid. He's the kid. You know, you first off, you weren't missing a thing not watching Wisconsin hockey. Let me tell you that. It was boring. It was a snooze fest. They brought in Hastings as the head coach in Wisconsin last year. Hastings, an old school coach. He's hard on the kids and kind of the way that you want him to be hard on the kids. And that rubbed a lot of young players the wrong way last year. I mean, we saw four, five, or six transfer out of Wisconsin this time last year. Among them, guys like Will Whitelaw, Brady Cleveland, who are transferring again this summer. Quinn Finley said no. He said, I'm sticking in Wisconsin. I'm going to stick through the program. I see this coach's vision for me. And I think this season, he was every last bit of Wisconsin's number one guy. I mean, he was making plays not only in the middle lane, but getting to the board, pulling the puck off the board. He's finding space. He's always been probably one of the best shot generators in his age group, at least in America. Even when he was in the USHL, he was posting the best expected goals per 60 in the league at his heights. And I think we're seeing every ounce of that scoring upside continue forward while he adds these passing abilities, this strength and ability to get bullied and still get through traffic, and this leadership ability that comes with being on a team that does not have an identity right now. And I really say that's where Wisconsin is. So, man, I'm a huge Quinn Finley fan. I'd get a little crazy with his ranking if I were ranking the
Wow.
Islanders program. But temper expectations maybe, but if he hits, I mean, this is a boom potential, I think.
All good stuff, Gabe, honestly. So, two questions I have. First one, how is his two-way game? Because we see the numbers. Second one would be, do you see him signing after the season?
Yeah, yeah. So to answer two-way game, needs to be better. It needs to be more engaged, is what it is. It's not that he doesn't know what he's doing, but he's reaching before he's taking the step into the opponent. He's following him into the zone rather than finding the lane to cut him off. Kind of these little technical pieces that when you think about a kid trying to project to a second line center, fringe first line winger, maybe kind of role, they're going to have to be able to keep up on the defensive end to move into the offensive end. So it's probably where his biggest weaknesses are. In terms of next season, first off, I'll say Wisconsin's improving, and I think improvements for the Badgers could mean a Hobie Baker season out of Quinn Finley. I think we
Ooh,
saw 40 points, 45, 50 plus, not out of the question as they bring in more firepower. And even if he's not final three in the hat trick for Hobie, maybe he's final 10, maybe he's at least getting nominations. I think no matter what bucket he hits, that's got to be enough to call college college, right?
wow.
This is a kid who I think had projections as an AHL player this season, decided to stick with the Badgers, and if he has a big year next year, there's no more to be done in Wisconsin. Head out east.
Well, now one more bonus question. So
Yeah,
you're super high on him.
I
And he might not
love
be
Quinn
the only
Finley.
Hobie contender we're talking about tonight, but
Yeah.
where would you have him ranked in the Islander system?
This is the hot take. This is the hot take, and we'll get to it, I think, a little bit more when we talk about the player. I'm sticking him one spot above Cole Iserman.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Like him that much.
One might be a better shooter, one might be a better scorer, one might have a special knack for getting the puck into the weird corners of the net. But Quinn Finley drives the lineup. Quinn Finley didn't have Cole Hudson or any of these other guys pushing him forward. He had to figure out himself. He had Logan Hensler backing him up on defense. And I think he made it work. Wisconsin was not fun, but they were fun when Finley was on the ice. I think he has a strong pro projection as long as he keeps adding muscle. So I'm betting high on him, even though that might be the Chicago-based Quinn Finley
Eh,
and rubbing off on me in a positive way.
all right, I like it.
N- No, I like that. Do you have a NHL comparison for him by any chance?
NHL comparison off the top of my head.
Stylistically, it doesn't have to be your
Yeah.
stat equivalent,
Yeah.
like
I
style
almost
wise.
think of a Dylan Strome kind of
Okay.
Okay,
comparison
it's a
where,
good one.
they just control the middle of the ice really well and they control it in chunks. They make a play at the defensive blue. They get the puck through the neutral zone. They get it over the offensive blue and then they know how to funnel space into the slot once they're in the offensive end. And if they can't do that, they got a killer shot. So I think Dylan Strome, he's not going to blow up in any one category, but could be a good, well-rounded guy.
I like that. Let's hope.
Yeah.
That would be huge.
All right. Number four, we're going to Danny Nelson, the Islanders 2023 second round pick, 49th overall. His stats this year, he played at the University of Notre Dame, 36 games played, 13 goals, 13 assists for 26 points. And he also played in the World Juniors this year. He played 7 games, had 4 goals, 2 assists, and 6 points.
Gabe, what do you think of Danny? I've a lot of good reviews. Seems to be very solid across the board. Somewhat similar of a projection to a Bednarik, I would say. Perhaps a bigger version where if he's a 3C at the NHL level, I think you could be happy with that. Just a solid two-way game, can score a little bit. Looked really, really good at the World Juniors. When I was watching the World Juniors, there was a couple of games where I thought he was one of the best players on the ice.
Mhm.
So what do you think on Danny Nelson?
Yeah, I am so excited to get y'all's take on Danny Nelson before I share mine. This is the Islanders pipeline is so fun for me because it's all college guys. It's all guys that I've been able to follow for years. And Danny Nelson is a kid who at 15, 16 was really impressing people, really impressing collegiate scouts and already getting good attention. He hit some issues with lower body injuries, surgeries around his transition to juniors. And then in that same wave, he moved from defense in AAA to forward in juniors. He's doing that while recovering from injury, while adjusting to the pace of juniors. And he did it beautifully, and he's been beautiful ever since. I mean, he's a utility guy. He's a pure utility guy. I think when we talk about players who know how to get on the ice and get something done, Danny Nelson is one of the best prospects in the NHL for it. Um, I agree entirely. I think his World Juniors was lights out. We needed a boom out of him. We needed to see what Danny Nelson could be, and we saw it at World Juniors. Um, I don't think that, I would go throwing out, 60-point projections for Danny Nelson or anything. But I think this is a kid that can be, maybe a bigger and skinnier Blake Coleman or something. A guy who rotates around your bottom three lines. He can play wing, he can play center, he can play power play, he can play penalty kill. No matter what, you're betting on him being smarter and slicker than his opponents, and he's proven to be that at every step so far.
Yeah, I love the point about him transitioning from defense to forward as well, because you could kind of see that in his game, right? I almost feel like when I watch him at the college level, he sacrifices points because he's so responsible in the defensive end. And I feel it's pretty rare to see that at the college level too, because of course these guys want to win, but these guys also want their career to go beyond college. So I feel like at times you could maybe see a little bit of stat padding, but this kid cares deeply about the details of his game. And that's one thing I love about him. And I think that's what NHL scouts love about him too. He's so responsible. He's got the two-way game, and he could chip in offensively when needed as well. We saw it at the World Juniors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the right assessment of who Danny Nelson is as a person. Detail oriented, willing to put in the work, ready to put in the work. He knows he has a job to do. This is a kid who has been invited to pretty much every single USA hockey camp he could get invited to. if only to have Danny Nelson around. He is a coach's favorite in the USA Hockey pipeline. He's a kid that USA Hockey is going to be calling for, I think, many years in the future. Even if he blows up and never becomes anything for the Islanders, I bet you he's the first on their list when the NHL pulls out of the Olympics again. I mean, this is just, he's a passionate kid. He's a kid who cares about his craft. He's a kid who works hard. And he's a kid who can wear another letter. You know, we said that about Bednarik. We said that about some other guys. I think Danny Nelson's another one that you can see donning some kind of A or C at whatever level he ends up.
Yeah, just all around just sounds like a Lou Lamoriello pick. I know he's not here anymore,
Yeah.
but that's Lou to a T.
Yeah.
All that detail, hard worker, all these things, it just points right to Lou. Lou might have taken him first overall if he could have.
I think he might have. I think Islanders would have taken him as early as second round, you know,
Yeah.
if they had the open pick to do it.
Yeah.
You said so you're very high on Quinn Finley. Where would you rank him, Danny Nelson, in the Islanders?
You know, I think there are two changes that I'd make to this top 10. I'd bump Gamzin up just above Gidloff, give Gamzin number 6, move everyone down. I'd bump Finley up to 2, might be overeager, but I'd bump him up to 2, move everyone else down. I think Iserman's 3, Danny Nelson still has to be 4 or 5. Um, he's not flashy, he doesn't have a rock star projection, but he gets things done. And if I'm building a prospect pool, if I know I got to bring personalities on to do a job, Danny Nelson's the kind of person I want.
Love
Good
hearing
stuff.
that. Need players like that. So we're moving on to number 3 here. We have Isaiah George, 2022 fourth round pick. He was picked 98th overall. This year he played a little bit for the Islanders, played 33 games. Sorry, the New York Islanders. Played 33 games, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. Early on he looked pretty good and then kind of went downhill afterwards. And then he went back to Bridgeport for the same amount of games, 33 games, 4 goals, 10 assists, and 14 points.
Gabe, take it away.
Man, so you're giving me the pressure with this one because this is the one Islanders fans have their eyes on. I
Mm-hmm.
think Isaiah George was the player to watch in the Islanders pipeline this season, and I think he did it well. I think he answered the bell when he needed to answer the bell, and the longevity's not there yet. But I was kind of shocked to see him playing NHL minutes to begin with. So, you know, I think he handled physicality more and more as his NHL tenure went on. When he went back to the minors, I think you saw that stand up. You know, he was more confident. He was making plays, stepping into guys a little bit more. You know, I don't think this is a flashy guy by any means, but another guy that I just like to have and like to think he can pull off a second or third pair role for me.
To put it into perspective, Gabe, this prospect pool was so poor that when Isaiah George got called up and had a couple games, we were calling him the Prophet Isaiah. That's how desperate we were getting for a little bit. But I like his game. And I think you could sort of compare it to what you said before about Alex Jeffries, where call a guy up, see if he could find his way. Maybe he could find his path, find his role at the NHL level, and he could build confidence. When George first got called up, he looked very, very good. He definitely can keep up physically. He's a good skater for his size too. He's a pretty big dude and he skates well. I think I think he could be a very solid defensive defenseman at the
Yeah.
NHL level. I think if you find the proper partner where maybe someone like a Dobson stylistically or a Tony DeAngelo, if you keep someone like that around with him, that he could just stay back, play his game, play defense. He could be a really, really solid NHLer. I think he tops out probably as a middle pairing guy. If he's a bottom pairing guy, you probably have a really good team in the future, I would say, if he pans out the way we think. But yeah, I like George's game a lot. I think he is one of the most interesting players to watch come training camp because it would be huge for the Islanders if he could earn a role in the decor. And, you know, the questions come up. Who would they move? You know, Is a guy like Pellick maybe more expendable because you have a George coming up? Similar style of play, just a defensive guy. You know, it's it's a big question mark because was it just a flash in the pan or is that his game? Because he did tail off, and I think Tyler would agree. Prior to getting sent back down, he did really come back down to earth. He was no longer the prophet, but I still have high hope.
Yeah. I mean, he looked really good when he got called up.
Yeah, I think they went on a hot streak when he came up too. I think they had a
Hmm.
crazy record his first 8 or 9 games. So it just all coincided with each other. But yeah, I like George's game. You have to temper expectations because I don't, Gabe, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't ever see major offensive production from Isaiah George.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd agree for sure.
Yeah. But again, finds his role, could be a really solid defensive defenseman.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think when you watch these young kids step into the NHL, they're setting their brackets. You'll see their top moments, you'll see their bottom moments. Guy like Sam Rinsell in Chicago, his top moments are sky high. Then he was getting walked in the defensive zone. His bottom sky low. I think Isaiah George set a bar that might not be top pair, but it's as close as you can get to top pair without getting there. So if he comes in and finds a middle ground, I think it settles in as a second pairing guy.
All
Solid.
right. Moving on to number two, we have the Islanders 2024 first round pick, 20th overall, Cole Iserman. Last year at Boston University, 39 games played. He had 25 goals, 11 assists, and 36 points. He also is in the World Juniors for Team USA. 7 games played, 3 goals, 4 assists, and 7 points. And he was doing that while not playing the most minutes. So it's pretty impressive.
I'm going to start this off just by saying I can't believe he dropped to 20.
Yeah.
Still can't believe
Hmm.
it. We're almost a year removed from it. Can't believe he dropped. I remember Butcher Gross, even during the broadcast, was saying the pricks prior, this team should pick him, this team should pick him, this team should pick him. And he just kept falling, kept falling. And it's funny because I feel like Islander fans kind of forget we traded back from, we were originally 18, and then we traded back prior to the draft to 20. And if you would have told any of us that Iserman was there, we would have been completely shocked because correct me if I'm wrong, Gabe. I believe borderline top 10 going into the
Oh
draft,
yeah.
correct?
Oh yeah. Top
And,
three on pure talent.
yeah, and I'm big on the draft, so I always take an early look. Like right now, even though the 25 is coming up, I like to check out the 26 prospects, just get an idea. And I remember a year prior to Iserman's draft, he was actually ranked right behind Celebrini. They were like neck and neck for the first spot. Not that anyone in their right minds thinks Iserman should have gone close to Celebrini, but it is crazy the fall off he had. I do think part of it is just the over analyzing of prospects people do at times. They see them play so much, they label them as one dimensional. I think you can sort of make the one dimensional argument about Iserman. He is a scorer, he needs to round out his game, but what he does well, I feel, is an elite talent.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. And they had Iserman right next to Celebrini because those were the partners in crime at Shattuck St. Mary's while they were both there. I mean, they was those two, and they walked all over kids. And all throughout his tenure at Shattuck, Iserman was probably the best youth hockey player I've ever seen in terms of blazing down the boards, knocking over defenders like they're NPCs in a Mario game, and getting to the net and putting it in the twine. He's done exactly that every single step. We saw him at the NTDP with James Higgins. He needs a guy to pass it to him to get his wheels moving. But when he gets his wheels moving, he's knocking over defenders, he's putting it in the net. The question at Iserman's draft was, can he do that in college? This is a kid that's been, relatively one-dimensional, and I'd agree with the one-dimensional argument. Maybe not entirely one-dimensional, but what he does well, he's really good at, so he's able to lean on it. Question was, can he do it away from a Higgins, away from a Celebrini? Can he do it in a tough Hockey East conference? And he did. He did. I mean, absolutely. I think all of Iserman's strengths carried through. He's still blazing down the boards. He's still pushing the puck deep into the offensive zone. And he's still finding a way to get, into or around the net. He had some insane goals in the latter half of BU's season. That's when they needed those goals most.
Yeah. And you know what else I like about Iserman's game? He definitely has some bite to him. He
Yeah.
he
Yep.
likes to lay the body. He likes to get under your skin. You know, I struggle finding a comparison to him because I know a lot of people like to throw like the pure goal scorer types out, like a line A, which I don't really see him as a line A. Line A is a much bigger frame. You know, I know they both have the big shots, but I almost see him somewhat like a DeBrincat, where he's very one-dimensional, just a little bit more bite. Maybe he won't score at the next level like DeBrincat, but I like to say, DeBrincat, but make the cat part a dog because he's got a little bit more bite to his game. So would DeBrincat be a fair comparison for you, or would you see someone else?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you say replace the cat with a dog. I have a circle of scouting buddies and pros in a few juniors leagues who really like making dog comparisons for kids. And before this, I wrote down my little scratch notes. Iserman's a Rottweiler on a leash. At World Juniors, at BU, he might only get 10 minutes of ice time a game because he's charging out for a big hit. He's making some goofy play in the defensive end, or he's taking some silly penalty. But out of those 9 minutes, out of those 10 minutes, you feel comfortable playing him that little because he's going to make an impact. He's going to find some kind of spark. I can't remember the last game that I watched Iserman where he didn't do something. Even if it's not a point on the score sheet, he's getting a penalty that kind of makes you step back from the kid and say, "Oh, I don't want to go into the corners with him," or he's generating 12 shots on net in a single game, something crazy like that. Um, Iserman's interesting, and I think it's worth hitting on because I'm surprised that his personality hasn't become more publicly aware since
I
he's been
agree.
drafted into the NHL. This kid's got a personality on him. He's got a
Hell.
Brady Kachuk, a Matthew
Hmm.
Kachuk personality in him. He wants to win. All he cares about is hockey. It's his life. I mean, he's dedicated mind, mental, and body to the game. He's really good at one thing. He's strong enough to be good at that one thing through every level he's played at. Iserman's going to be a weird NHL player. And it was big personality and weird projection that dropped him to 20. But I know for a fact that Lou Lamoriello was sitting there waiting for 18 to come around. Then he saw the pace of the board, so we could wait for 20 to come around instead, and knew that his kid, Lou Lamoriello's star, was going to be there. I think that's what the Islanders got in Iserman. He's a Rottweiler on a leash. He's probably going to need that leash at the next level too, but
Mm.
he's going to make some kind of impact, whether it's a 25 goal and 5 assist a season or something like that. He's going to be a goofy player, and I think he's got, I mean, star potential, top line everyday star potential at his ceiling, at his best.
Right. And it's kind of funny because when we talk about the two BU prospects, they're almost polar opposites, right? Because if you're up at the end of the game, you're going to see Bednarik hopping over the boards to play some defense, win a faceoff. If you're down and trying to get the tying goal, you're going to see Iserman hopping over the boards because you need that big play, you need that offense. So it's sort of, I find it sort of funny that not only they drafted these two kids, but they play together at the college level and seem to be good friends because it's, it could be a nice thing to have. And I know the prospect we're about to talk about might be the sort of player that's a perfect complement to an Iserman. But if Iserman doesn't fully work out, I think he could also be the type of player that would be a nice complement down the road with a Bednarik if the scoring doesn't come all the way around and if he has to be more of a role player, play that physical game out of Bednarik's line. Because I like seeing that with players. If you have a little bit of physicality, if you don't pan out, which we know happens very often, more often than not, you can play the bottom six role. So as one dimensional as Iserman is, I think worst case scenario, he could still be a very good third liner.
Yeah, yeah, he's heavy. He's heavy
Yeah.
enough to be. And I want to plant the bug because I know we'll get to some more conversation after the top 10, but I want to plant the bug that New York has the potential to pair Iserman with one of his closest friends in James Higgins at this year's
Yep.
draft. And man, well, I love to see that. Those two are great friends. James is quiet, cool, calm, collected, leader, stoic, all these things. Then you got Iserman, who's one of the biggest goofballs or one of the most serious hockey players that I've ever met. And so it'd be, a great mix of personalities, great mix of style. Obviously, two kids that work well together, but we'll see if Higgins is the pick.
Yeah, well, that's usually how it goes as far as good friends or people that work together well. It's yin and yang, right?
Yeah, yeah, and they really are.
Yeah, seems that way.
All right, moving on to our number one spot. We have Kale Ritchie. He was the Avs 2023 first round pick. He was acquired in the Brock Nelson trade. Last season, he played for the Colorado Avalanche. He made the team off from training camp. He had 7 games played, 1 goal, 0 assists, 1 point. Then he went back to the juniors. He played for the Oshawa Generals. 47 games played, 16 goals, 55 assists, and 70 points. And then the playoffs this year with the Generals as well. He had 21 games played, 9 goals, 16 assists, 25 points.
Yeah,
Gabe,
I
take it
can
away.
I can jump in on number one here. Cal Ritchie's a fun one. Crazy, crazy to think of how that trade has ended up. Cal Ritchie, another top pick for all of 20, maybe over 20 games from Brock Nelson for Colorado. This one is going to make the Avalanche regretful. Listen, I think that there are some really big Cal Ritchie fans out there who will say all these glamorous and glorious things about him, and he's got the skill to meet all of those expectations. He's quick on the puck, processes the game at lightning speeds, knows how to make a play, knows where to be in all three zones. But I want to go back to the point that I said a little earlier when we were talking about Isaiah George. When these kids step into the NHL, you can see their brackets pretty quickly. Even if you're not seeing where that middle ground is, even if it's super fuzzy, you can see the brackets. And man, Cal Ritchie looked like a top line center at points while he was playing with the Colorado Avalanche. I loved how he made use of space around the slot. I love how he made plays a stick away from the crease. I mean, he thinks quick, and with, his two-way game, with the smarts that he has, I I don't think that it's unreasonable to say that he could be the next in the pipeline of players like Ryan O'Reilly, players like Horvat, who I know Islanders fans really know how to appreciate, especially after this season. That might be high bridges for Richie to fill, but hey, if he's in the O'Reilly pipeline and he falls a little short, gets 80% instead of that's still a good second line center.
Big time. Yeah, and I honestly love so much of Cal Ritchie's game. I feel like he gets described pretty often as this two-way guy, which is true. He's pretty solid at everything. I don't, you could correct me if I'm wrong here, Gabe, but I don't know if he has one spectacular asset in his game. I mean, I
Yeah.
think he's pretty well balanced straight across. The one knock I do see some have is the skating. And I know it seems to have improved since his draft year, but do you potentially see that being an issue at the NHL level?
Yeah, skating's an interesting kind of critique to have because it can make or break a player, and where that threshold is really individual to each player. I think how Richie moved in the short stint he got a pros last year, I really liked. I don't think that he was flashy or quick, but I think he got around well enough. Obviously, then he went back to juniors, and now he's bigger, stronger, and faster than all these kids. So it's kind of hard to gauge kind of where he fell after that. I don't think he's going to be a great skater at the pro level, but I don't think that it's going to hold him back. I think if anything cuts Richie down, it's going to be overthinking. It's going to be trying to do too much in high traffic. It's going to be not keeping up with plays coming off the breakout and into the neutral zone. But I think he does all that well. So I think, yeah, smooth projection, skating be damned.
Any player comps? Again, I don't want people to take these comps as they're going to be as good as this player, but
Yeah, no.
stylistically, who would you say Cal Ritchie is most like?
I really like him as a Bo Horvat type. Honestly, that
We
was,
love that, obviously.
Yeah,
Now, will he
yeah.
have, not that Bo's overly physical, but can he play a bit of that physical game the way Bo can?
I think that's the question. I really think that's the question, and that's going to be the piece that holds him back. On top of everything I just said, but I don't think he got physically challenged in the OHL this year. I think he needs that, especially as we think about him being NHL full time, hopefully within 2 years, probably 2.5 at most. Um, that's going to be the piece that he needs to pick up and get used to is being physical against men.
Right. And now, as opposed to a Bo Horvat, could we see him be a less physical but more cerebral Bo Horvat? Is that a potential?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think Bo does it well. I think I said O'Reilly earlier. O'Reilly does it well.
Right.
These guys are smart and cerebral and know how to attack their flanks, but they really pave that middle lane well. And they control drive from one end to the other really well. And they get the puck to the end boards, to the net really well. And I think Richie does that. Bo
Right.
Horvat's a really special player because it's hard to find a true playmaker at an NHL level. You got
Right.
to be smart, you got to be special. Richie might not have that pure playmaker in him. He might be a little artificial playmaker, but he blazes that middle lane well. And so I think if he has that, I mean, that's what lands him with, a floor of a low second line center. Uh, yeah, worst.
Yeah. The reason I asked on the physicality too is because someone like Bo Horvat, he's built like a truck. Like I know Richie has a decent build to him. I know he's probably got to fill out a little bit more,
Gotta
but
get
asking
bigger.
him to be a Bo Horvat size wise and the way he carries himself day to day is a little bit difficult because quite honestly, Bo Horvat's a bit of, I think we forget sometimes, he's a bit of a specimen. I mean, the guy's, I believe, I want to say 6'1", he's like 225. Like he's a big dude. He's a truck and he skates like he's 190, So it's rare to find players that are that heavy and skate pretty well, but I hope Richie could fill out more and become just like a Bo Horvat because obviously as Islander fans, we love that comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've said it with so many of these kids, we're at the top of the top 10, so I think we can be a bit reflective, but they're pieces here, right?
For
You
sure.
look at building a future lineup. We've talked about a third line center. We've talked about a guy who can stave off the top six center depth in Ritchie. We've talked about the scorers on the flanks, potential boom options in Finley and Gamzin. It's an interesting class. And I think having a really even keeled guy like Ritchie on top of that class makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and now that you sort of described the class as a whole, we're going to have a bonus question here before we get into the Q of A. Now, it's got multiple layers and multiple parts, but we know this New York Islanders club got very lucky at the lottery, and they won the lottery and will be selecting number one. First, I want to ask you who would be your pick. Second, I want to ask you, as a whole, how much does this potential number one pick, whether it's any of these names, help this pool as a whole jump? Like once this number one pick is made, where would you see this prospect pool as a whole be ranked amongst the NHL? So first, who's your pick, Gabe?
Who's my pick? I'm breaking apart from the pack. I think that's what I do
Oh,
pretty
wow.
frequently. Um, let's say it's a two-headed beast. You got Michael Misa, who's an exceptional status, exceptional scorer. I don't think he's ever fallen low of expectations, even though some kind of critiqued his season last year. I think Michael Misa is a superstar with 40 plus goal potential at the NHL level. But listen, my pick is going to be James Higgins.
Wow.
Wow.
Out of all these kids, and yeah, hot take. I mean, entered the year as consensus one. Now he's fallen. Listen, Higgins is a star. I can attest to that. I think personally, I met the kid. I've been in the rinks with the kid. I was watching him keep up pace with Michael Hage and Macklin Celebrini at Chicago Steel Camp when he was going there as an underage prospect. He's such a defined personality. I think he's such a cerebral tactician on the ice. He slows things down in his head and knows how to make plays that work with the context that he's in. James Higgins also jacked. I don't think that's getting nearly enough credit. He might only be, 180 or so right now, but the kid's got biceps on him. The kid's got pecs on him. He's going to fill out in an NHL weight room. I'm getting so much criticism for this from some of the guys I work with best. But I think James Higgins is closer to being a Jonathan Taze kind of star, two-way, support the superstars kind of top line center. Now, obviously, Taze was one of the best of his era. So we can't really, it's like comparing a kid to Patrick Kane.
Right.
Can only go so far, but Higgins is a special player. I know personally that he's a special player, special mind. So I'm taking him because I haven't been up to Saginaw. I haven't gotten to shake Michael Misa's hand. But if I had a scout across the room say, Gabe, you're stupid. Misa scored a goal per game this year. We're going him. I don't think the Islanders are hurting because of that pick either.
Now, one player you didn't mention, and I believe you did release an article about um, valuing centers more so than defensemen in the draft, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
Really good article. Check that out if you haven't. I really enjoyed it. Um, but you didn't mention Matthew Schaefer at all. So one thing I wanted to ask, first of all, if James Higgins is from Toronto and not Long Island, do you still take him number one? And two, what do you think of Matthew Schaefer as a player? Because it seems you didn't even mention him. Like for you, it wouldn't even be a possibility at number one.
Yeah, yeah. So Hagen's from Long Island. He's a Long Island boy too.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Hagen's and Matt Coronado, who should have ended up in New York. It's a tragedy that he's in
No, I
Calgary.
hate that you brought that up. It hurts. The extension
Terrible.
hurt. He's from
I
the
know,
town I
great
currently
extension.
live in. It all hurts, Gabe. It all hurts.
And they got the same agent. So, maybe one day in the future, maybe that's why we got James here. No, I think Higgins is my number one because I'm confident that he can be that well-rounded star. I had someone ask me the other day, Gabe, you're drafted in 2017. You're telling me you're taking Nico Hischier over Cale Makar. And I said, whoa, 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 we cannot make those comparisons to either of these players, Higgins or Schaefer.
Right.
But also, yeah, I'm making that pick. I mean, Nico Heischer's wearing a C for New Jersey. He's a star two-way guy. I think he's going to be in Selke votes one day in his career. That's a pick that you're comfortable with, even if McCarr's on the other side of the league tearing it up. My argument with Schaefer is not against the player or the person at all. He is a special kid who's gone through so much and persevered, come out the other side. He's a real star. I mean, you watch him this season, you watch him at Hlinka, you watch him in the OHL, you watch him in the game and a quarter he got at World Juniors, and he had the confidence with the puck. He was able to move it from goal line to goal line and get a point on the board. He's stylistically really in that conversation of these top end NHL defensemen. But my argument's pretty easy. He played 20 games this year. And as a scout, knowing that my job might be on the line if I were in the NHL war room making the decision, I'm going with the guy that I'm confident in, and I'm confident in Higgins. Schaefer, I don't want to bet on an injury, even if it was, a collarbone injury. It took his season away from him. That really stings.
Mm.
But there's an important but here. What better program for Matthew Schaefer to end up in than the New York Islanders? He's 10 days away from being eligible for next year's draft.
Yeah.
And if he's in next year's draft, I don't give a heck about his injury, about a lost season. I'm looking forward to next year and excited for what he can do. Islanders don't stink right now. They're far better than a San Jose or a Chicago or a Nashville. Islanders could make the playoffs next season off of a little luck and pixie dust alone. Um, and I think if that's your outlook, taking a guy like Schaefer at one makes a ton of sense if you think they can be a superstar defenseman with the right conditioning. So it's tough. It's tough for me. I'm a Schaefer doubter, if only out of principle, if only out of hype for my man James Higgins. But Islanders could really do whatever they want here, and I think turn out with a good outcome.
I
Yeah.
actually really respect that take. I feel like most of the guys making these lists, they're putting Hagen's, like I saw a list today where Hagen's was at 8, I think. And they're just completely ignoring the only 20 games played for Schaefer aspect. So it's nice to hear a different hot opinion there, you know?
Yeah.
I love Higgins. And listen, I love him. I wouldn't take him at one. And we laugh about
Mhm.
this now, Gabe, because going into the lottery, every single Islander fan would have told you if we
Yeah.
end up with James Higgins, we are ecstatic. We're happy. We're so excited. And then we won the lottery and got number one. And we're so cocky now. We're like,
Yeah, yeah.
no, we can't go James Higgins. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. There's a top two. It's Misa or Schaefer, probably Schaefer. And honestly, I've fallen in love with Schaefer. Schaefer's my guy at
Mm.
one. Our Discord as a whole has fallen in love with Schaefer. Shout out Zach Schwartz, who coined the Schaefer Syndicate, which we all run with now. Love it. Every time I see a highlight reel of him, I post it. Great idea from him. But yeah, for me, it's Schaefer. I think Tyler as well. Schaefer. I
Mm.
respect your Higgins take. And from everything I've heard, he's just such a great kid. I would love a way in a perfect world if you could take Schaefer and somehow trade up and land Higgins. And
Exactly.
I do think Higgins is sort of going through the same thing that Iserman went through, where people are beginning to overanalyze him and drop him in the draft. So I know it's dream world, it's Kevin Costner's draft day, thinking you could trade up for him as well. But I do think he's the sort of player that Islanders brass should look at trading up for and having their number, right? Saying, listen, if he falls beyond 5, maybe we start making calls, things like that. But final question I want to ask you before we get to Q&A, I'm sorry. With the addition of the number 1 overall pick, and you could give a range here because I know it's hard to give an exact number, but what range would you rank the Islanders prospect pool as a whole
Yeah.
going into next
So
year?
going into next year, all right. Well, first I'll say, I'm on the Higgins bandwagon. Going to be on the Higgins bandwagon through the draft. Y'all are going to hear me say probably too much about the kid. On the other side, I'm still going to be there. I'm there until the end with this kid, but I think the pick is Schaefer. All of the sources that I tap into think Islanders are going Schaefer. All the guys around Erie that bug me think Schaefer's going to the New York Islanders. Like I said, they have the room for him. So, if it's Schaefer joining this group, well, not only is he instantly the top prospect, superstar potential, but I think that takes this group from maybe being, 18, 19 range. I think people put the Islanders prospect pool down far too much. I mean, there are even sleepers on this list that I'd be proud to have in my pool. Xavier Veilleux out of Muskegon, Zach Scholes, Dennis Goodbog, just big boys. I mean, big boys turn into pro
Yeah.
hockey players. So I'd say Schaefer would take the Islanders pool from probably 18, 19 to like 11 or 12, right?
Wow.
Then you got your number one defenseman. You got a guy in Richie that you can hope will be your number one center. You got a scorer in Iserman. You've got upside in Finley, and you've got a utility player in Danny Nelson. Round it all out, you got Schaefer's understudy in Isaiah George and Jesse Pulkkinen, hopefully, right?
Hmm.
So, I mean, when it comes to prospect pools, it's, I think, less about cumulative value and more about who's going to be able to put all these pieces together and make a full puzzle. I think Schaefer or I think Misa as a 40 goal plus scorer upside ceiling one day. Or I think Hagen's, another top line center kind of guy. I think all three of them put New York really in a top 15 spot at least.
And it's nice to hear because it really seems like a time to be bullish on the Islanders prospect stock because not only do they now have the number one overall pick, you look at their roster and who's incoming, you might trade out more vets, add more picks this year. You have 2 first-round picks coming next year. So it's a really good time for the Islanders prospect pool. And it's nice to see after years and years and
Yeah.
years of drought, to be
Yeah,
quite honest.
y'all have gone through it. Kyle
Yeah.
Palmieri played a little too much hockey for my
Yes.
liking.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But Tyler, we want to get into that Q&A?
Yeah. Our first question is from Dom. He said, "How much more value does a right shot D carry over a left shot? Assuming in this scenario, apart from their uh handedness, they're the exact same player. Same question for the right shot centers as well."
Yeah. I think it's a little bit less impact for right shot forward. Right shot forward doesn't matter too much because if you got a lefty that's better than him, you can play him over the right shot forward and get better results. You can play guys on their offhand, but when it comes to defense, it really is a huge difference. Righties can't play on the left side, lefties can't play on the right side, and there are a whole lot more lefties out there than there are righties. So
Hmm.
I think when I'm sitting down, if I have, let's say 5 kids at the exact same level of value, but they're all, at the 5 positions, I'm taking right D, I'm taking center, I'm taking left D, and I'll worry about the wingers later. It's always a question of what can you make up for in free agency? And it's always wingers and defensemen, left shot defensemen that end up on the market.
Okay, next question from Mark D. He said, "Any second round targets the Islanders should be looking at?"
Second round targets is a
Mhm.
good one. This is the year of the overager. And New York, the Islanders have shown that they're not scared to take a kid like Jesse Pulkkinen in the second round if he showed that he earned it. I think lean into that this year. Charlie Serrato, center out of Penn State, is projected to land probably in the second round, maybe early third. He's a buzzsaw of a centerman. Absolute box cutter center. Makes plays in front of the net, behind the net, in offense and defensive zone. Kind of bounces players off him like he's a Tasmanian devil. Knows how to play with edge. I think Serrato's the kind of guy that you want with the back end mind of, icing him as a third line center or third line right winger one day. Outside of Serrato, I'm also throwing out over age pick Bryce Pickford. Scored 20 goals in the WHL this year, and I'll tell you, he earned every one of them. Killer shot, killer instincts. Shane Van Saggy, heavy defensive forward. I think my comparison for him is going to be Marcus Foligno. Van
Okay.
Saggy's in there at Michigan State with Nightingale, and I think he drops out of the first round. I think it'll surprise a lot of people. And I said in my newsletter, I'll say it here too, be ready for Ben Kindle and maybe even Carter Bear after that injury to slide into late day one, maybe early day two. If Islanders think they can have a home run swing in either of those guys, again, I think this is the prospect pool that can tank it.
Right. One player I wanted to ask you on quickly, and perhaps it's the hedge of Hagens because this is another Long Island guy who I believe you like, and I hope not to butcher his name, but Ethan Wittenbach. What do you think of
Oh
him?
yeah. Yeah,
Another
Winbach's a
Long Island
great
guy,
kid.
comes from Roslyn.
Yep. Great kid. They know how to build them in Long Island. That's another
Coming.
thing that I kind of had in my mind with this episode. Long Island hockey's on the come up. Love them goals. Love the goals. But Wittenbach played AAA last season. You couldn't tell it this year. He was a star in the USHL, made big plays, scored big goals, got to the net. I think he's super unrefined. I mean, I think you have to fold in those technical bits and then teach him how to be a pro player. I think that's going to probably take 3 or 4 or 5 years, full college run, maybe some AHL in there. But I'll have Wittenbach is, early to mid third round guy. He's tenacious. He's an absolute great personality. Won the inaugural USHL Gaudreau Award for embodying the spirit of those two men and what they brought to the USHL. And that's a testament. Winning that award out of the gates, I think says a lot about Wittenbach on the ice, off the ice. He's got a lot to add to his game, but he's got the makeup of a good player.
Like that a lot. Yeah, and you said it. Long Island's becoming a factory for hockey.
All right, the next question. So domed. If the Islanders don't take Hagens and don't trade up for him, how far do you think he could potentially slide?
That's an interesting one too. I mean, we saw him at 8 on the list today, so
Yeah.
man, I
Shouldn't
don't know,
slide
it could
that
be
far, in my opinion.
20 again.
Yeah.
No, the more things come together, the more the conference finals pull together, the clear vision we're getting of this top five. And I think this top five, in some way, shape, or form, is going to involve Schaefer, Misa, Hagens, Martone, and Desnoyers. And now the question is who's fallen out of that group? Desnoyers has been lauded for years by Eastern Canadians. Martone's got the size and the grit to go with his scoring. I think out of the bunch, Hagens is probably the most likely to end up in Nashville. And if Nashville thinks that they're pulling a 3 trill IQ move, signing Steven Stamkos in the summer again, and they go with someone random, someone like Brady Martin or something, I think Hagens could maybe fall all the way down to 8 or 9, but I don't think he's leaving that top 10 one bit. It really hinges on an emerging idea in the NHL. A lot of GMs, a lot of front offices are really starting to think you got to have two offensive lines to win a cup. They both got to be solid. They both got to be watertight. So even as we think of, Philadelphia with Michkov or a Boston or a Seattle, guys that might have some people contending for these top line spots already, Hagens isn't going to be a wasted pick because at worst, you got your Evgeny Malkin to go with whoever you can put into the Sidney Crosby role.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't see him falling past 5. And how funny would it be seeing the Long Island kid get drafted by Barry Trotz?
Yeah.
I think it happens. I think it
I
happens.
think that's the fit. I think because Chicago, I always say at the top of the draft, you always go best player available. But at a certain point, if you have a certain number of prospects, you do have to sort of go with need. Like if San Jose was 1, Schaefer would be a no-brainer. They need the defenseman. With Chicago at 3, I think they have so many small forwards that it might be kind of hard for them to take Hagens over a guy like Martone.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't see it sliding past 5 for Hagens.
Mhm. I like it. I'm gonna mock him to Nashville all the same, so I'm with you.
Okay.
All right, next one from our boy Josh Elkin. He says, is it too early to pencil Isaiah George as a third pairing defenseman for the Islanders next year?
I love it. You know what? I think it might be too early to write him in there with pen, but if we're talking pencil, if we're saying we can change it up a little bit, yeah, I think he's the kid. He seemed to take in the lesson of the NHL last season. I think that's really what I saw with him is he wasn't abundantly skilled and jumping off the page. Even in his bright moments, he was earning them before he was being gifted them. And if he takes that to heart, adds a few pounds of muscle this summer, learns to be strong in his legs, I mean, who else are you playing there? Right? I'm not putting Boquist or Perunovic above Isaiah George, simply out of principle and trying to get the best out of my guys. So I think George in the NHL full time next season makes a lot of sense. And if he's not in the NHL full time, he's got to be AHL top pair.
Now, I had a take the other day I wanted to ask you on, Gabe. I almost think a player like Isaiah George would be better served as the seventh defenseman in the NHL, practicing with the big guys and getting games from time to time versus playing in the AHL, especially if there's not much improvement down in Bridgeport, where they had an
Yeah.
absolutely abysmal season last year. So, do you buy that or do you sell that? Would you rather have him getting top AHL minutes if he's not playing every game at the NHL level?
Yeah, golden point about Bridgeport and kind of the room for growth there. It's interesting. It goes back to, I think, same sentiment as the right shot versus left shot question. How do we pull apart the intangibles of these kids? And for a lot of players, I don't think that seventh roles, extra roles make a lot of sense because a lot of players lose that technical feel, really quick. It's hard being in the press box and your only time on the ice is an hour and a half every morning. But I think Isaiah George is the kind of kid that it makes sense for.
Right.
He took that in, he adapted, he showed growth in the minors after you sent him down. So I mean, if my options are, 15 games in the NHL and the rest of the season in the minors, or maybe he rides the bench and sits in the press box for 25 games, but then he's got 57 in a full everyday role. I'm taking that second one. I'm taking that second one, and I'm hoping that he can be, every night in the lineup in 2 years.
All right.
I just really hope we see some young talent in the lineup next year.
Yeah,
More than just
gotta.
one or two players, but we're going to move on to the next question from Devil's Minion. He says, does Tristan Lennox have any real chance to play in the NHL, or is he a dud?
Man, I hate calling kids duds. I hate I think co-signing on the death certificate. I think Lennox improved this year. He was losing his crease after the draft. He kind of looked like he was getting rattled a little bit. I think he looked calmer and a bit more poised, but I don't know if I have NHL hopes for him as much as I'm hoping that he can find his legs in the minors, sit there and really build up some strengths, and then entertain NHL flashes, fold them in. I like Gidloff and Gamzin, assuming they both come to North America more than I like Lennox.
Fair.
Yeah. Next, we have from K-Mac. What is Kale Ritchie's top ceiling slash comp? Which you already said Horvat. Then he said, and will he be able to make a big impact on the NHL roster this upcoming season?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I think this is another great chance to fold a player into a role that they can learn from. Because I said earlier, I said Bo Horvat, I said Ryan O'Reilly, and both of those guys have found their passion in the NHL. You see how they train, you see how special they think about the game. That's how they've gotten to, Selke Trophy consideration. O'Reilly won a Conn Smythe. I can't attest to Richie being some, special thinker or anything, but I think his ceiling really is that top line center, two-way impact, maybe even getting Selke votes one day kind of kid. In terms of next season, I say do it. I say put him into the NHL, let him learn from Horvat, let him kind of follow in the lead and see what the role he's going to be is. But I don't know if he scores more than 45 points, maybe. I mean, maybe that's a generous ceiling, but
I'd
he
be
got sent
happy.
back to the OHL. And so I think he's going to have to stew and kind of learn his role a bit at the NHL level, no matter when he comes in.
Fair.
Yeah. And then the final question we have from the Bry Man is Odelius still a prospect with upside?
Yeah, yeah. So that's another one that I think the Islanders fans will definitely have a little bit better clue into because the question all along with Odelius was how he would translate. And I don't think he's exploded in the AHL just yet. I mean, we're really waiting to see it. I think he was okay. I think he looked a bit soft and slow at the beginning of the year. I think that transitioned a bit later in the year. He was starting to make plays at the blue line. He was starting to get the puck up the ice a little bit more. I want to see a breakout. I really think he needs a breakout. He needs a big year. But at the worst, I mean, even if Odelius isn't going to be some, NHL top four defenseman, can we say that he's going to be Cal Roseanne, or one of these guys that rotates between the AHL and NHL for 5, 6, 7 years and makes a few good impacts along the way? I think Odelius, with his size, especially, might fall into that pit. Breakout could pull him out of it and give him that top six projection back. But either way, especially with Goodbog sitting opposite of him, you got a tiny kid, you got a huge kid. I think Islanders got room to give Odelius what he needs to either break out or flash out.
Yeah. All good stuff, Gabe. And I want to thank you for coming on with us. You did a great job.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I would love to have you again sometime soon, but at some point we got to wrap up. I would love to do a top 20, but we can only go on so long. So
Hmm.
time to end things here. My name's Rocco. You could find me at Pizza Sports Guy. We have Tyler at Bars Down, and Gabe, tell everyone where to find you before we head out.
You can find me on Twitter at NHLFoley or on Substack at gabrielfoley.substack.com. And thank you guys for having me. This has been a blast.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Well, you guys heard him. Follow him. Make sure to check him out, and we'll see you guys next time.